Hi, Gishema. Dilek. Glad to see you here with us today. So we will start. I will just make you co-host so we can find it. Okay.
Geshe is muted, right?
Geshe, you're on mute.
My apologies. Okay. All right, let's start with some breathing meditation. Just focus on the breath, to be in the present. And then allow yourself to be inspired by visualizing the embodiment of all the enlightened qualities we have the potential to attain, to appear in the form of Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of you. With a body entirely made of light, wearing the saffron-colored robes of a monk. Looking at you with great love and compassion, conjoined with profound wisdom that realizes all phenomena. And then think that you're so surrounded by all sentient beings. For whose benefit we're here today. All sentient beings who are just like us, controlled by their ignorance and all the other afflictions. Wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. Yet constantly creating the causes for future problems. And try to generate what's called affectionate love by seeing the endearing aspect of sentient beings. having a sense of concern, feeling of closeness, and an openness towards each and every sentient being, no matter how obnoxious they may seem or behave. And that sense of affection then gives way to great compassion that is based on the understanding that sentient beings suffer simply because they have a mind that is controlled by ignorance and self-centeredness. And so let's generate an affectionate mind that sincerely wishes for all sentient beings to be free from any type of dissatisfactory existence. And the wish to be able to help them to overcome their dissatisfactory existence. Together with the causes of ignorance and self-centeredness. And that aspiration then becomes stronger. Transforms into the special altruistic attitude that is determined to take personal responsibility for helping sentient beings to overcome all their dissatisfactory states of mind. All the experiences of dukkha. Whatever else is in the way to the liberation from samsara. And since we can realistically only achieve this if we attain the enlightened state of a Buddha, let's generate the mind of enlightenment that is not only aspires, but is determined to become fully enlightened. To have the greatest possible benefit to each and every sentient being. And it's also with this mind that we continue to study the 7-point mind training. So then let's recite the prayer, taking refuge in Bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so again, my apologies, you didn't hear me before. There was some misunderstanding about the time. If this works well for you, we can meet next time at, 5 p.m. German time and then 6 p.m. Israeli time. Okay, great. Okay, so let's start right away. Let's start with the questions. Okay, no, I have to first.
Do you have it or
Do
you
something.
want me
I've
to
got it.
share them? Okay.
Yeah, I got it. I prepared it just now. All right, so let's see. Can you see the questions? Do they appear on the screen?
Yeah, if you can do it bigger a little bit.
Yep.
No,
I'll
thanks.
try and make them bigger. Just a sec. Okay.
Yep.
Can go even bigger. No, that's too big.
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, so this question is from Jimmy. This is Shmuel, sorry. The first question is from Shmuel. I also got another question, but I couldn't open it. So delete Tal's question, although you said it has been answered. Somehow I couldn't open it. So maybe for next time. Okay, so Shmuel's question, very important question. I mean, they're all important. They're all really good questions. By the way, if you don't have a question, that's not a problem either. So don't worry about not having a question. So it's totally up to you. Someone asked me about that. So it's not a problem. But it's still nice to hear your doubts and your debates, in this case, a debate. So here the question is, in the lessons, self-cherishing was defined as considering oneself to be more important than others. Also, Shantideva said that self-cherishing is the root of all suffering. If this were true, very good, if this were true, then self-deprecation would not be suffering. Okay, so first of all, we can all agree that self-deprecation is a form of suffering, though it depends on how you define it. Some people speak in a very self-deprecating way, which doesn't necessarily reflect their state of mind. Sometimes it's done for a good joke. So that's kind of slightly different, or for the sake of maybe wanting to seem very modest or be likable. But here we're talking about the state of mind, like a self-deprecating state of mind, in the sense of humiliating oneself, disparaging oneself, and I would add maybe self-hatred as well. It's an even a more intense form of self-deprecation. Now, of course, we all know it's a type of suffering. If there's a mental state, we feel low about ourselves, we don't feel good about ourselves. It may even go to the point of hating ourselves, that this is a form of suffering. Okay, so he says, if self-cherishing is defined as considering oneself to be more important, or if it's said to be the root of all suffering, then according to Shmuel, well, if you have self-deprecation, you don't have self-centeredness, because self-deprecation seems to be the opposite of self-cherishing. You consider yourself to be lower than others, and so you wouldn't have suffering because you have an opposite type of mind. Because self-deprecation would not be included within self-cherishing. Okay. Well, first of all, I totally agree. Self-deprecation is not the same as self-cherishing. And in the moment when you have self-cherishing, in that moment, you don't have self-deprecation. It's a different type of mind. So I don't think you can have both at the same time. I mean, I'm saying literally, if right now I have self-deprecating thoughts, I don't think There's self-cherishing in the form of, oh, I'm so much more important than others. However, my argument would be you cannot have self-deprecation if you don't have self-cherishing at some point in time. Okay? At some point in time. Now, self-cherishing, that sense of I'm more important, my happiness is more important, it doesn't always have to be active. In fact, it can lie dormant and still affect our other types of mind. But my argument would be you cannot have self-deprecation or even self-hatred, self-dislike without self-cherishing at least lying dormant and at least affecting our actions. Okay, so anyway, let me just read this. So self-deprecation would not be included within self-cherishing. I agree, self-deprecation is not, include in the sense it's not a type of self-cherishing because it does not fit the definition of self-cherishing. Yes, absolutely. It would not fit the definition of self-cherishing because it's not considering oneself as more important than others. Yes, I agree. So these last two statements, I totally agree. But my argument was never that every state of mind is self-cherishing. My argument is as long as there is self-cherishing, either in the form of lying dormant. Okay, so all of you are probably aware of, or you know what it means to lie dormant. All of us have anger at a certain time, definitely attachment, but that doesn't mean you must have attachment right now or desire. You could be totally without desire right now, but then when certain triggers arise, then of course desire returns, which means right now, desire or anger, these states of mind, they lie dormant. They lay dormant, they're latent, that's another way of putting it, they're inactive, but there's still the potential for them to arise again is still there. And on top of that, they're present even in a latent state has an influence on us. Okay. All right. So I'm arguing here when there's self-deprecation, there's no self-cherishing, but self-cherishing lies dormant and you can only have self-hatred, self-deprecation, and so forth if you have self-cherishing. Now, how do you define self-deprecation? How do you define self-hatred, for instance? Well, considering myself worse than everyone else and considering myself a failure and thinking I'm so stupid, I'm this, I'm not that, and so forth. I think we can agree that this is how self-deprecation kind of manifests in the form of those thoughts, considering ourselves worse than everyone else and disliking ourselves, most importantly. But where does that come from? If there wasn't a sense of self-centeredness, a sense I'm more important, my happiness is more important, which gives rise to the thought my success is more important than that of others. Okay, so we live at a time and in a society that's very success-oriented. The value of humans, of ourselves, is seen by ourselves in dependence on how successful we are, right? It's very much, it starts in school, having good grades, then later on, I don't know, going to a good university, getting a good job, getting well paid, having a certain income, and so forth. So this is the sense of success we have nowadays. And oftentimes, self-hatred arises from a sense, I need to achieve this. I need to be really good. I cannot fail. Because of our self-centeredness, our own failure is a lot worse than that of others. If my neighbor is overweight, it's okay. If I'm overweight, oh no, no way, right? Starting with the body, for instance, too big, too small, too square, too round. We will have these thoughts, right? To a certain degree. Especially if we're more fixated on the body, of course, we have these thoughts to different degrees, but definitely at least as a teenager, more than maybe later on, or who knows. Anyway, so being dissatisfied with our body. So it's much harder to bear a certain body type, if it's our own body, then that of our neighbor. We're much more forgiving when it comes to that, for instance. And then mental qualities and what is called success. So my own failure is a lot worse than anyone else's. My embarrassment is a lot worse. You know, someone else embarrasses themselves in front of others, and I'm very forgiving, but not if it's me. So self-hatred doesn't just pop up. We're not born with self-hatred. It develops because of certain qualities we may not have, because of having failed and so forth. So for someone who has low self-centeredness, they fail, okay. They're successful, okay. They don't consider their own value to be dependent on their failure or their success. And again, what does it mean, failure and success? It depends. It's totally relative. There's no inherent success and failure. It's all dependent on what society we live in, which society, our own interests, our own desires, etc. So even from there, we see self-centeredness is at the center. And any self-deprecating person, it's not that they're self-deprecating all the time. Sure, there are moments when they hate themselves and other moments when they feel, I'm much better. If there's an area they're good at, they may have a moment of arrogance. I'm not saying that every self-deprecating person is arrogant, but we all have our moments of arrogance, which only ourselves, we can recognize. It may not be obvious to others. So I'm saying that we have our moments of self-deprecating thoughts, we have our moments of arrogance, we have our moments of self-centeredness. But the point is, and those are different moments in time, but the point is that self-centeredness is the underlying cause, is the underlying root cause. Because otherwise, I'm big, I'm small, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm squared or round or whatever. What do I care? I just am, right? If there wasn't a sense of, but again, because we wish for a certain body type, curly hair, you want it straight, straight hair, you want it curly. I'm lucky, I can't even tell I've got, well, I guess you can tell I've got straight hair. But the point is, no, the point being, jokes aside, the point being that without self-centeredness, self-hatred because of not being the way we want to be doesn't arise. And as I'm saying, it doesn't come from, we're not born with it. It develops over time. I mean, I don't think there are self-hating children, for instance. I mean, self-deprecating children. I don't think so. Start with puberty and it goes on. But I'm not saying that self-deprecating people are selfish. I mean, we're all selfish. We're all pretty much equally selfish. Maybe there's some degrees, but really we can't tell. So we all have a basic self-centeredness there. And out of this, yes, there are moments we have a hard time with our own failure, right? But the way yes, I know, I do. Just a sec.
No. Just can you give an example for like the high self-esteem and the low self-esteem?
Okay. So here it's not self-deprecation, it's not self-hatred, but
for the self-hatred.
Okay. Low self-esteem and high self-esteem. Okay. An example of high self-esteem.
This I'm very familiar with, but the other one, like,
what
do you really mean with self-hate? Like,
okay.
I want to harm myself, like the people that do suicide, or?
Oh, well, I don't know really. I mean, like, there's so many different types, but the way I understand self-deprecation or even self-hatred, when people feel like I can't do anything, I'm such an idiot, I'm no good for nothing, again I messed up, oh, look at yourself. And I don't know, maybe also because of these thoughts then giving rise to, I don't know, cutting yourself. I'm not saying cutting yourself was coming from that, but maybe punishing yourself in that way, or just having all these negative thoughts about yourself, right? I mean, I've had my share of negative thoughts, especially when I was a teenager, as part of puberty. Oh, I'm so ugly, there's another pimple there, and I'm fat, I'm this and so forth. So I had these thoughts, and there were self-deprecating thoughts. I felt depressed. I felt not good about myself. I felt in the presence of others. I always thought others were greater, or I had these thoughts, or this person is much greater and I'm not like this, and so forth. Whereas a person who feels comfortable in themselves, like whatever mistakes, okay, I have mistakes. I have a lot of negative habits and negative qualities. That's okay. There's room for improvement. But I also have all these good qualities.
That's healthy, let's say, self-esteem. If you have high self-esteem and you fail, then it's from the same root, because you expect yourself to do better because you think highly of yourself.
You see, the root, I mean, self-centeredness is all the same for us, right? But it can be stronger for some and less strong. So definitely having self-centeredness, if it's not as strong, then exactly when you fail, okay, that was good. I can learn from this. I can learn from my mistakes. And next time I do better, and maybe you work harder. So, but is there still going to be like, ooh, like a little, at least a sense of, I mean, if I fail, it's worse than if someone else does, right? Someone else who I don't know, for instance. Or when I suffer, it's worse than when someone else does, someone I don't know anyway. That shows that there's a sense my happiness is more important, my failure is worse. But then there's so many different degrees. People are very different. So we all have the same basic self-centeredness, but then for some it can be stronger at times.
But that's what I don't understand. When you say that, then it can be because you love yourself or because you hate yourself. So I don't understand the self-deprecation thing.
You don't understand the self that hates itself?
Yeah, because what you said, or worse, or it can also be because you think of yourself too much. So I don't really understand.
I
mean, definitely not how what is it for sure, but
okay. So you're saying
not just what's the point. It's like, what do you do with it?
Okay, so I think Shmuel's question is, if someone has a lot of self-hatred, they can't have self-cherishing, right? In that moment, when you have self-hatred.
Yeah, but what I'm asking, what does it mean with self-hatred? That's what I'm saying. Is it like what?
What does it mean? Well, like I said earlier, so having thoughts such as, I don't like myself, I'm the worst, I'm more stupid, like when you,
This I got, but that's what I'm saying. It can also happen if you have high self-esteem, not just.
You're saying that having self-hatred doesn't necessarily means to have low self-esteem. Yeah, I guess you're right. For someone who has high self-esteem, but would they really hate themselves to the same degree? Like if you have high self-esteem, you get the sense, okay, this time I made a mistake, but next time it's better, right? I mean, you're much more comfortable with yourself and have a sense, okay, this time things don't go, but I have other good qualities, etc. I think you're more protected from it with high self-esteem. But the thing is, like, our mind is not, I mean, we can't generalize. I may have high self-esteem on Monday and then self-hatred on Tuesday. I mean, things change as well, although there's a general tendency of having high self-esteem in general. And so if I feel low about myself for a few hours, my high self-esteem may set in and I may go, okay, never mind. Next time I'll do better, right? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, it's really complicated because, of course, the mind is so much more intricate. It's much more complicated than saying high self-esteem or low self-esteem. I mean, things change all the time. But my point is basically, and I think Shmuel's argument is really it's really powerful in the sense when you say, well, self-hatred is the opposite of self-cherishing in terms of how the mind perceives the self in a given moment when self-deprecation or self-hatred is active. And I totally agree with him. But the fascinating aspect is that it's actually self-cherishing that gives rise to self-hatred, right? That's the point. And someone who has no self-cherishing, they have the best. So let's take an arhat, have the best situation for self-confidence. So they're like someone who's without self-centeredness have the ideal scenario for high self-esteem, when they would have very high self-esteem. And if you just look at the lamas, like some of the highly realized beings, they definitely don't lack self-esteem. I mean, there's a sense, I can do this, I can benefit others, I need to benefit others. I mean, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I've never seen him lost for words. I've never seen him, I mean, it's not like I see His Holiness, but you know, like you do in interviews, there's a very strong sense of inner strength and self-confidence, right? And others before self. So, and of course, other great masters and just people you meet in Dharamsala who are not famous, who are not, but who after a while you figure out they're really good practitioners. There's a very healthy sense of being comfortable with themselves, having high self-esteem, even though they're like at the end of the line, even though no one knows them, no one looks at them, no one seems to care about them, but they're just really comfortable with themselves. Right? It's like no one likes me. Okay, I like them. Most important. That kind of attitude. Does that make sense?
Geshe Ma,
Yes.
I had a feeling, a thought, and I heard your explanation. Before I even start practicing getting rid of the cherishing, I need a certain level of confidence. Yes. If I have low esteem, I'm not good in this, in other words, I'm lazy. I have to work on my self-confidence before I even start practicing. And only when I get to the starting point, then I can start trying to change my self-cherishing into cherishing others. Before that, it's not good to practice. I cannot practice it if I'm no good, I'm useless. I have to practice about something else, isn't it?
I would agree. Well, what is enough self-confidence? Of course, it's difficult to put a number in it, how much would be enough. But I agree, if you have very low self-esteem, then putting others before self, as in the form of cherishing others, could be misconstrued to self-sacrifice, to put yourself down, and it just, the process is just strengthened. I agree with you. Our practice becomes more effective the more self-confident we are. And actually putting others first in the sense of really understanding our interconnectedness and that others outnumber me and that my happiness is important, but because there's so many others, their happiness is more important. That type of love and compassion can really lead to a healthy sense of self-confidence, but without a certain healthy sense of self-confidence, it's impossible to start this practice. So yeah, or to be effective enough. I totally agree. I totally agree. And you see, for me, being around Tibetans, I mean, I'm not saying Tibetans are perfect and they're all, no, of course, we all know they're just humans the way we are. But if they don't lack one thing, then that's self-confidence. I mean, we sometimes equalize self-confidence to being confidence in front of others, but I don't think that's the same. They may be shy and they may have a sense, oh, I don't think I can do this. But that's a different type of, it's like they may have a sense they can't do it, although they can do it. Maybe some women have a sense, oh, I can't really do the same as the boys can, when in actuality they can. But that doesn't mean that they lack self-confidence, because they're still comfortable with themselves and okay the way they are. They don't pretend to be this, that, and the other. And they're confident also to stand in the back, for instance. So I'm not saying that they should, but I'm saying that the Tibetans are a good example in general of people who really have self-confidence in a certain way, in a type of, it's okay, I'm not the best in this and that, but that's fine, I'm okay, and I'm sincerely happy when others are good at this, that, and the other. So this ability to rejoice. So with this, they have a good basis for practicing effectively. And the stronger that sense of self-confidence is, the more successful the practice. Yes. And self-confidence is such a big issue in the West, and it's not really addressed in Tibetan Buddhism. Why? Because Tibetans don't have the same issue, or they're just starting to have the same issue now that they've entered living a similar type of life that we live. But yeah, it's very important, and it needs to become much more part of Buddhist practice to increase our self-confidence. But I know personally, definitely my self-confidence has grown through Dharma practice, but I don't know how it did. It just got better over the years. It took time. Anyway, okay. But going back to Shmuel's point here, so I think he's right. He's totally right with what he says, but I would argue self-centeredness is the root cause. So Shmuel, please, if you're here, you're welcome to argue back, or you can respond next time if you don't agree. This is an interesting argument. Okay, now let's go to the next question. Sorry, that was a little longer than expected.
You have to share again because I stopped sharing.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll share it again. Oh, there we go. Okay, so then Jim's question about virtual reality goggles. My body is walking, and that is me. When we say that my body is walking, wouldn't it be the case that first is just some ownerless walking body? Okay, so I talked about this with the virtual reality goggles, the experiments they did. When the person looks down on them, the body they see is actually that of a dummy. But the mind kind of identifies with this body, and even even experiencing pain in certain moments, when, for instance, a knife is inserted in the dummy, it can lead to actually experiencing pain. So my argument here was that our association with this body there's a huge part of it is mental, which accounts for the fact that someone who's realized emptiness actually directly, well, they don't experience pain in the same way, although they're still connected to this body. Of course, we're connected to this body and not to the body of a dummy, but a lot of it is mental. That's what I'm saying. So it has to do with our self-centeredness, which is why we have a hard time to put ourselves into another person's shoes, which is, of course, necessary to do in order to practice compassion. So it was in this context I talked about this experiment. Anyway, so Jim's argument is that wouldn't it be the case that first we have a sense of the body, like some ownerless walking body that is not ours yet. It's appearing to our mind, and then we become emotionally attached to it. Well, in principle, yes, but it's not like there was any time ever when our body just walked around on its own and our mind had to kind of get a sense, oh, this is my body, unless there's some mental disorder. What is it called? Like body integrity disorder or something, I think it's called, where you have a sense, this is not my body, this is not my limb, I want you to amputate my arm and so forth. This is a mental disorder that I'm not talking about. No, I'm talking about having a sense of just my body not being in the sense of like there being a time when our body was doing something and we didn't have this sense of my body yet. No, this didn't happen because the moment our mind and the ovum from our parents were joined together, our mind from that moment accustomed to the idea, this is mine. I don't know when this started. Of course, we don't know exactly when there was the first time, like my body, this association with this body versus someone else's body. So for instance, twins in the womb, you can watch them actually punching each other. So one of the if you have twins together in the mother's womb, and there are these videos of them, one punches the one twin, and then the other one punches back. So there's definitely a sense, how dare you? So you punch me, I'll punch you back. Definitely a sense of me and my body. So there was a long time in the womb that we got used to this sense of like mine. And those don't have to be coarse kind of thoughts, but still kind of subtler types of conceptual thoughts of mine versus other. And so I don't think there was a time when we were literally walking around and suddenly feeling, oh, this is my body. It was a very gradual process. But the point of this experiment is that we're so used to associating, looking down on ourselves, in our case as full-grown adults, for instance, looking down at ourselves and having a sense, oh, there's some entity, it must be my body. And again, the point being that our mind, a lot of our sense of my body is mental. I mean, of course, there are also sensations that we mentally have when someone pokes us. However, pain, etc., in many cases, I think it's an interpretation. Definitely, if you certain sensations that one person feels is pain. I mean, to a certain degree, like weaker kind of sensations, some interpret it as pain and some interpret it as pleasant. So it definitely has to do with the mind. Anyway, yeah. So therefore, I would argue it took a long time to become emotionally attached to our body. Okay. Anyway, the second point, also as a related idea, when we're instructed by, again, Geshe Kelsang and Geshe to consider others as that is me, maybe this is not just a make-believe idea, but in fact actual reality. Why? Is this because since our eyes are us, so are the colors appearing in our eyes are part of our eyes and therefore part of us? That's very mind only. And therefore part of us. They're us, they're me. Okay, well, of course, to a certain degree, the thing is, when we say us and others, our perception of us versus others, or me versus others, is totally extreme. To say others and I are identical, that's another extreme. So there's something in between there. Yes, in fact, conventionally we speak of, yes, my mind and another person's mind. But in a sense, it's true that we cannot totally exist separately from the other person. So seeing the other person's body, of course, that is seen with my own eye consciousness. I wouldn't say that from a Prasangika school point of view, you wouldn't say that although the object of the other person's body is an object of my mind, therefore it's part of me, you wouldn't go as far as saying that. That this is part of me just because it appears to my mind in a very unique way. However, it's still true to say it's very much dependent on the other person, and not just our sensation of others, but also everything we know, everything we are is because of others. I mean, our knowledge, our understanding, our mentality, our personality, all this is because of others. And therefore, it's impossible to really separate it. That's the point here. And in fact, we can only be happy if they're others, because of love and compassion and so forth. These states of mind directed at others, they're responsible for well-being and happiness. But so my point is here, the way we perceive I and others as separate is an exaggeration. It's not as separate as it seems. On a conventional level, we're not the same. But to say others are a part of me, well, a part of me, again, in the strictest sense of the word, maybe not, but we're very much interdependent. I think it's better to put it that way. So to be part of me, I mean, we say our children are part of me, but then what does define me? The person is that which is, like in the scriptures, for instance, the definition of the person is a being who's labeled on the basis of his or her own 5 aggregates. Now, I don't label I on the basis of the aggregates of my children. for instance, or someone else. So in the strictest sense of the definition of a person, the other person is not a part of me. But that is just on that conventional level, how I define a person. And still, the point Jimmy is making here, that, again, without others, I wouldn't be who I am right now, is not contradictory. Okay. So again, to just quickly summarize, I don't think that just because I see another person's body and that's that body appearing to my mind is my mind's object, is this unique appearance to my own mind, that doesn't make the other person part of me. It's not that. But still, to be this person having this experience in that moment, I still need the other person. So therefore, most important is to understand that I'm dependent on others for who I am. My happiness, my well-being is all dependent on others, which is why it does not make sense to not give that same happiness to others. And of course, when it comes to suffering is our own making in that sense, but it's our love and compassion for others that lead to happiness. And so therefore it makes sense to generate these kinds of mind, and I need others for that. Okay, anyway, I'm not sure it's clear, but let's continue. The same goes for the sense of touch through our skin, and actually even more so. For example, when I touch my friend's arm, I only know her through my skin, which is me, because my skin is me, therefore it's also me. She's also me. Well, the same argument. No, I wouldn't say she's you, because it's the sensation, but that's not the trigger. The trigger, it's not the same as the sensation. So the trigger is the other person. The sensation is what you experience. You need the trigger, but they're not identical. It seems so obvious to me. Sometimes my friends jokingly say, Jimmy, there's something between us. And then I also jokingly answer, okay, so there's something between us, but not as much as we sometimes feel. No, there's nothing between us. We're just one. This just happens. I think it's a common experience for everyone. We're just mindful enough to notice it and think about it. Does it make any sense? It makes sense to me, but to say we're one and identical, just philosophically speaking, like I said, the definition of person being imputed on the basis of one's own 5 aggregate contradicts that. But again, the separation is not as great as we think, not at all. In fact, we're very, very closely connected. Okay, about enjoyments and sufferings. I always panic whenever I catch myself enjoying something, because it always comes together with ignorance. When I'm being mindful and observe things as mere dependent arisings, I mostly feel equanimity and disinterest in everything. But whenever I catch myself enjoying something, there's only because it seems inherently existent. The happiness seems to be contained in the object, be it food, a person, or whatever else. That I seem to enjoy it is the warning sign that I'm being ignorant at the moment. Even my best friends keep reminding me that you shouldn't enjoy my company because I'm just a projection of your mind. And I have to admit that she's right. I feel like a dog whose bone has been taken away, but I didn't get the big meaty sausage that was promised instead. Why can't I enjoy my mental projections if I recognize them as mental projections? I don't think you need to panic about enjoying something. Of course, we need to be aware that our mind is such that whenever there's enjoyment, there's attachment. It just happens. But we don't need to be scared of it. It's just the way our mind works. I mean, it may be a very subtle attachment, which we're not even aware of. I think it's good to be mindful to not allow ourselves to be totally controlled by attachment. So when there's like a pleasurable moment, you're like, oh, I want more of it. I want more tomorrow and so forth. So to get attached to it, because we're just limiting ourselves. We're imprisoning ourselves through our own attachment. However, well, I mean, enjoyment, of course, there are different degrees. We can never enjoy things the same way an arhat enjoys them, or even the Buddha enjoys them, obviously, because there's always self-centeredness and ignorance and so forth. So to enjoy something for what it is, of course, is the best way of enjoying things, but with unrealistic expectations. But there are different degrees to being able to do so. So being mindful and observing things as mere dependent arising is great. But if it becomes like you can't enjoy anything, then you won't be able to do Dharma practice. You can't do Dharma practice without having some joy and pleasure. That's why many of the great masters, including Lama Tsongkhapa, he recommends us, or they recommend us, to only practice as long as it's joyful. So you should enjoy Dharma practice. There should be enjoyment. And so even enjoying other things, even enjoying food, I mean, I don't think you need to eat foods that you don't like just because of the danger of enjoying yourself. So again, my example are the Tibetans, and I'm not saying every Tibetan, but many of my teachers, my classmates, for instance, who enjoy things, but with the sense of no expectations. I enjoy it for what it is right now, and if I get it again, fine. If not, never mind, kind of idea. And being happy is considered really important for Tibetans, for instance. Being happy, not having trouble is very important. It's very much part of their culture. So when someone creates trouble, there's this saying like a trouble without trouble, which means, in other words, making trouble when there really isn't any. It's very hard for them to bear this. It's like when there are people around who create trouble, they're like, why? Life is difficult as it is. Why create even more trouble? So very much the sense of let's be happy, let's enjoy. But it's an inner joy. It's a much more an inner joy. It's not so dependent on other objects. So they enjoy still certain objects, but there's less of a sense of dependence on them. So the greater the practitioner, the more you get the sense that it's not external objects, it's food or not food. This joy comes from like an internal joy, and there's nothing wrong with that. So really to enjoy anything just for what it is, because this joy comes from within, there's nothing wrong with it. Yes. So, and then even in objects, I mean, enjoy an object just for what it is, food, a person, and so forth. So the greatest practitioners, I mean, it doesn't matter who they're around, the most obnoxious person, and they're just as joyful as if they were around a good friend. So again, I think it's important to understand that our mind clings at external things, like you say. Happiness seems to be contained in the object, and of course that's the mistake. So to not stop enjoying things, but to be aware that this joy should come from inside to the greatest degree we can do. But of course it takes time, and ignorance is not going to go away right away. So to keep mindful and to watch our own mind, and I know that it takes time before we can actually overcome attachment and ignorance and so forth. Yeah, and take a little step at a time. Okay, and so you feel like a dog whose bone has been taken away. Okay, on the positive side, there's mindfulness that's helpful. Okay, so there's definitely some satisfaction from mindfulness. But yeah, people report that they say, oh, before Buddhism, I could enjoy things and now I can no longer enjoy, right? I've heard that many times. But what was that enjoyment really, right? I mean, wasn't it also, maybe, yes, there was that great joy in a certain moment, but it was very short-lived. And the worst problem was that our mind got so attached. I mean, I agree with what a lot of people say. I don't enjoy things in the same way as I used to. So I don't know, going out, doing certain things that I used to enjoy as a young person, like before I became a Buddhist, I don't enjoy them now. So I don't have these moments of like, wah. But these moments of elation, they usually lead to attachment. And they're not real inner peace. They're just like this excitement more than what I would call peaceful enjoyment, peaceful, like a peaceful sense of joy. I don't know how to put it. It's a different quality. Let's put it that way. All right. I hope I was able to address some of these questions, was able to answer them. I'm sorry, I talked a lot and it quantities, not necessarily. Doesn't necessarily means, I mean, talking a lot doesn't necessarily mean I've answered the question, but I have a hard time to actually putting my thoughts into words, so it took a little longer. Okay, so let's go back to the text. I didn't do the Lamrim today. It took a long time to answer the question. You had to wait for 2 weeks anyway before I addressed them. And since what we're going through right now is pretty much the same, we can continue with exchanging self for others if you are interested in combining it with the Lamrim practice. But otherwise, let's go back to the text, because there's one thing I wanted to, oh no, that's wrong. I wanted to address. Yes?
Can I ask something quickly?
Of course.
You said that the mind entered the fertilized egg. So is it happens also in vitro?
Retro. I think so. Yes. Once the egg, because not every egg actually, not every ovum becomes a living being, right? And so it would make sense, from my point of view, it would make sense because there's not necessarily a living being that has entered the ovum. And so it's not viable. At some point, it just dies off. But according to my understanding, when a fertilized egg starts to grow, then that means a consciousness has entered it. From a Buddhist point of view,
so when it becomes a fetus, or like while it's just the dividing cells?
Usually they say, from a Buddhist point of view, the reason the cells divide is in general, there is some exception, because sometimes they say the process may start before a consciousness enters, but it's still the karmic force of a certain being, right? So it's the karmic, they of course you need the cells, you need a healthy ovum, you need all that on a physical basis. But why do the cells start to divide into 2 and then into 4 and 8 and so forth? Why do they do that? Because of the karmic potential of the being. So because there's now a connection is made.
So when you keep them in minus 200 degrees, like you take it on day 6 and you keep the embryos for further fertilization. So it's basically like living in cold hell. Wait, I have no idea which body they have, but
oh, I wonder about, yeah, you're right. I didn't think of that, but now that you're saying, well, maybe that being then leaves that egg for a while until, right? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. This is not described. Maybe they're in that state and it's not a hell because they don't experience the cold. They don't have a nervous system that's fully functioning yet. So maybe they're just in that semi-conscious state. I mean, there's no nervous system yet. If you have a fully grown body, you experience the cold, but this is just a cell without nerve experiencing cold. Reacting to the cold is different to experiencing cold. So I'm not even sure that a fertilized egg, when it has started to divide, it experiences the cold in the same way we would, right?
But there is a mind there that for years it's just 300 cells. And it's like in some sort of, I don't know if you call it a bardo or not, but he has to have some experience, or is it like well, I can't even say a coma, but.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I mean, maybe it's like in that moment when the cells start to freeze, the consciousness leaves the body, exists somewhere else, and when it's time, it comes back. Who knows, right? I mean, this is a question I cannot answer. Only like an omniscient and clairvoyant person would be able to say, well, it's an interesting point. Yeah, this was not an issue for the Buddha because that just simply didn't exist. But yeah, depending on the karma of that being, maybe they just exist in a different way for some time. Maybe they're just in this in-between state that is not a pardo state, but it's a frozen, wait until it's over, coma kind of. Who knows? I have no idea. But I don't think we need to worry about that being non-virtuous or something. I mean, Yeah. And maybe, well, maybe, only maybe, I don't know. Like I said, in general, it is said that this being has already connected. So when you have a fertilized ovum and the ovum starts to divide, that this is because there's already a sentient being entered. But there are, I remember I've received the teachings, and I think I've also seen it written somewhere. I just forget where it was right now, that it may also be that there is no, it hasn't happened yet, no being has entered, but the karmic force, the being exists in a different form, but because of the karma, the process already starts. And when the time is right, this being will actually enter, right? So it's through the karma of a certain being, but the being hasn't connected with the ovum yet. But I think that's a special case. In most cases, I believe there is a connection made. But in this specific case, I really can't answer it. I have no idea. Sorry. Yeah, but it's a good point. All right. Now, what I wanted to do is, some people argue this text is too advanced and maybe not suitable for our daily needs. And I wanted to just briefly go through it and argue that it very much is, that it's just as relevant at this time and age, but of course we need to take it in certain portions. So let me just very quickly go through it. It won't take long. Okay, what is this first? These first two lines, they're really saying that this text has been passed down all the way from the Buddha. How do I care? Why do I care about that? Why is that relevant to me if I study and practice such a text? Well, for me personally, I would think, wow, they thought it was worth to preserve this and pass this on, and people have worked really hard because it is still relevant. I mean, there's so much in the past that's lost, so many other aspects, non-Buddhist aspects that were relevant at a certain time, but not now. But these texts were specifically under great hardships in certain situations were passed down to us. So to a degree, it shows me it's relevant. Okay. And then it tells me here in this verse that this text is very beneficial when it comes to my real troublemaker. It's like a diamond, the sun, the medicinal tree, my self-centeredness. Okay, that's to be seen. And that through this time that we're in with the 5D generations, and we're really at a time when things are really messy right now, and you don't have to be in Israel. Of course, the situation there, it's terrible. And what happened on October 7th as well. I mean, I just saw a report in the German news program. The whole country is still traumatized. I mean, there's still very much. Just recently, a friend of mine told me that there has been some research on what happened on the 7th of October, and like, oh my God, the rape and everything. So that part, of course, and of course, what's happening right now in Gaza and so forth, it's terrible. So that, but of course, in so many other places, like this president being elected right wing, and it's just scary. But to hear that this is really, if we talk about degenerations, it's definitely more degenerated than, I don't know, more degenerated than 10 years ago, but it looks pretty bad. This gives you the opportunity to transform every event into the path of enlightenment. So let's see. But it's this promise of, wow, however bad things get, here maybe there's a way to deal with them. All right. So this is just a part that's to be seen. Then preliminaries, of course, the preliminaries. Thinking precious human rebirth. Okay, we've heard one of the preliminaries is considering our situation, however bad it gets. But we're human, and that's a huge plus point. We're born as humans. We have certain freedoms, however bad it gets, but there's a lot of good in our life. And to consider that and to utilize that. To be aware of death and impermanence, it's going to happen to everyone sooner or later. So to be aware of that kind of impermanence as well. And of course, our actions have consequences, etc. So all this, it's relevant. It's at this time, it's relevant in the same way as it was 2,500 years ago. And then training in conventional awakening mind and the ultimate awakening mind. I mean, in the 21st century, it's actually, to a certain degree, some things are easier. I have certainly much more of a sense of so many sentient beings, right? If you lived 2,500 years ago, well, how much did you know about the different forms of life, the different types of insects, the insects just in a molehill and so forth? We didn't know that much about it. How much we're connected with everyone else. We are more connected with everyone else. So the fact that other sentient beings on other parts of the world, they're responsible for my food, etc. So to train in conventional awakening mind, it is just as relevant as at this day and age. And we have a lot of extra information that help us in our meditation. So we can definitely argue that way. Ultimate awakening mind? Oh, absolutely. In terms of our understanding of dependent arising. But let's look at the conventional awakening mind. Banish all blames to the single source. Well, in the 21st century, it has been established that there's more selfishness. It's actually sometimes selfishness, self-centeredness is seen as helpful in being successful, which is considered very important on a material level and so forth. And so it's the century of the I, as it's been coined by some psychologists in the past. So definitely there's more self-centeredness, and it's more obvious to us that this is to be blamed. That the more self-centered we are, the more trouble we have, right? So we have a lot of information again nowadays, and we can see that this is the case. Of course, on a subtler level, it requires more meditation, but at least on a course level, we understand that. And towards all beings contemplate their great kindness. Well, again, we have benefited from other sentient beings. Even, of course, they've harmed us as well. But because of our connectedness, there's definitely something that we can find possibly in the past. And also understanding that this whole world is so interconnected that our food comes from other countries, and the effort of one person in another part of the planet is responsible for us having this iPhone, etc. So it makes it easier to contemplate the kindness of other sentient beings. And we may feel like, oh gosh, I just want to hate that person. But come on, I mean, this hatred is going to eat us alive from within. Whereas this thought of thinking of the kindness of others, it's beneficial for us much more than for anyone else. So again, it's up to us which one we choose, but it also makes sense that we are connected to others and we benefit greatly from others. And that is more obvious to us in the 21st century. And then there's the practice of giving and taking. We certainly have a problem with stress. And one of the methods described when you're very stressed out is to take long and deep breath into your belly. So if you do a giving and taking, and because you need to visualize certain things, and you automatically take deeper breath. If it's beneficial just from that point of view, well, great. Helps us to work with our stress more effectively, taking deeper breath. But of course, if you've done it yourself, you feel it's just, if nothing else, in that moment, our own worries kind of disappear, and our focus is on others. But not giving way to worries, not the worries of other sentient beings, but a sense of satisfaction. So this practice works in the same way as it did 2,600 years ago. It does nowadays. All right. And then, of course, the three objects, three kinds of sentient beings. We meet so many people. There are those we like, we don't like, and the ones we don't care. And of course, our reaction to them, and then utilizing other sentient beings and our recognition of the three poisons, and turning that into virtue by wishing for other sentient beings to be free from these three poisons. So it may be difficult if there's someone I really dislike, who's really done me great harm, has really harmed me, has really given me a lot of pain. It may be hard to think, may they be happy? Because it's like, that's not fair. They should really suffer because I suffered. But it's different to think, may they be free from the three poisons? And that is actually much more important. if we could free sentient beings from their three poisons, it's much more important than freeing them from their temporary suffering right now. Because in the long term, of course, is that which gives them sufferings. And so by eradicating their three poisons, we're benefiting them in a much greater way than as if we could just take away their suffering and they would still be left with the three poisons because they would continue to accumulate the causes for suffering. But by removing the three poisons, to just wish for it, but the virtue lies in the fact that this is even more effective, to wish for them to be free from hatred, to be free from their ignorance. And that also feels a lot easier when it comes to those we have a hard time with. May they be free from their hatred, from their ignorance, their attachment, and so forth. And then, of course, during the meditation session or during our actual practice, when we're relaxed and maybe not focused on the practice to that degree, as to the degree as we did before, we're using slogans, using words. Psychologically, in modern psychology, people have been encouraged to use certain slogans, maybe just repeating, I'm a valuable being, there's nothing I cannot do, or something. So here in this case, you just use different slogans, mainly, may I be of benefit to others, may I be take away the three poisons of other sentient beings. They help our mind to keep calm, to keep on the topic. And something the other day, I went to see Geshe Kelsang just before I left for Germany. I went to see him and he was so kind. He's actually quite sick, but he gave me 2 hours of his precious time. If I had known, I would have recorded. But anyway, I didn't. But he talked to me and he said so many amazing things. So one thing I remember, he said this in a slightly different context, but just to give you a sense of how this is important. He said, it is really important when you're in your room, for instance, and you want to study the Dharma, and even if you don't really get the time, at least put the books in front of you. And I was like, how does that help? Reminded me of like sleeping on your, before an exam, sleeping on your book, hoping that at night it kind of, So I was like, how does that help? And he said his experience was, even when he was sick, so he's been sick for many years, and sometimes he doesn't have the strength to even read his books. But he said, like, just seeing the books lying there, it's something subconsciously in the mind. Again and again, your mind goes back. Like when you say, he gave the example of Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. It was in fact lying there right in front of him, but it was closed. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the fundamental wisdom. We've been going through it, right? Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the fundamental wisdom when we studied this text. So he says this text, even when he didn't have the opportunity to read it, when it was just lying there, automatically his mind went, when he saw it, just back to the subject matter, and it helped him to remember. It helped him to remember. And it makes so much sense that we just need to keep the mind on the Dharma in some way or another. Even if we don't have time, even if we go for weeks without sitting down to meditate, without any, practice, whatever, something to keep reminding you, something, put a money pema home, like a sticker on your toothpaste or whatever, or toothbrush, like something you keep seeing. The mind automatically goes back to that. So just keeping mindful. These are all means to keep mindful. And here to apply these slogans are a very effective way. I just reminded of what Geshe said. So just having these books around you, just lying there, and every now and then reading the title has on a subconscious level an effect on our mind. So anyway, so having said all this, and of course, when it comes to the ultimate awakening mind, come on, that phenomena are dreamlike, that they're like optical illusions, things don't exist the way they appear. There's so much nowadays that helps us to understand that. And we have the education, we have the background. People weren't as well educated as we are now, weren't in the past. So it was much harder to understand these concepts. And so just on an intellectual level, we have so many abilities. We have such a great background to help us to understand this. All right. So it was just something me arguing that this is just as beneficial as it was 2,600 years ago. So however difficult it may seem, it is difficult. If you practice this in the most advanced way, it is difficult. But any practice, even the Lamrim, each subject of the Lamrim, each text, each Dharma text, no matter how basic it may seem, there's a very profound level, a very deep and advanced level, and there's a level you can take this text as a beginner. So my argument is therefore this text is just as helpful as any other text, right? Especially here using it at difficult times. But we got to this part, the ultimate awakening mind. And in the end, we can make it a point that when things get really bad, to remember these are projections of our own mind. That the way I perceive this is very much influenced by my own misperceptions. It appears to be more concrete than it actually is. And the moment there's strong emotions, we know that this is the case. And just to be aware of it, is already helpful to take away the sense of solidity. Okay. So to remind ourselves, even if we don't really know what emptiness means, it doesn't matter. Just that reminder can be helpful and can be healthy. Again, it takes away some of the heaviness, this concreteness, the way it appears to be so concrete. All right. So this is also something we can practice. And now the third point. After the first 2 points, the preparation, the preliminary, and then afterwards the kind of essential, the main practice, which is the 2 types of bodhicitta. Now here, number 3 is saying, take adverse conditions into the path of enlightenment or into the path of enlightenment. All right. Now, how we're going to do this? It says, when the world and its inhabitants are filled with negativity. Is that true right now? Oh, yes. Of course, the world and mainly its inhabitants are filled with negativity. That's definitely a situation we find ourselves in right now. Transform adverse conditions into the path of enlightenment. So instead of wishing them away, pretending they're not there, trying everything to just remove them. Of course, we should remove them, but sometimes we just can't. Sometimes we just have to accept it. There's really nothing we can do. It's like Shantideva says, you can apply an antidote. Of course, we don't need to worry. But if there's nothing you can do, well, why worry, right? So sometimes we just have to accept it. But on top of it, we can use it to practice. And we all know how to do it. If you have all know means having some background in Buddhism, right? Having some background in philosophy or in the Buddhist principles. For instance, Shantideva. So now I don't have the exact wording, but Shantideva says, like, even suffering has its advantages. First of all, the suffering, this kind of problem we experience, is a good antidote to arrogance, right? When things go really well for us and everything is going, we're full of ourselves. We feel very, it's not just a sense, it's not confidence here. It's a sense of, oh, I'm invincible. It's like even a sense of, like a type of arrogance, if you like, feeling full of ourselves because things are going so well in my life. So it's a lesson in humility. It can help us to be more humble in certain situations. When things go really badly, can help us to work with our own arrogance. And we all have to a certain degree, a type of arrogance, but we may not even recognize. It may not be obvious to others. But definitely if we don't deny, if we're more honest with ourselves, we will definitely find that there is a certain degree of arrogance. And again, that can help us to be aware of this and to also lessen it. But he goes on to say it helps also to generate compassion with those who are in cyclic existence. And it helps us to refrain from negative actions, because understanding that our experiences are the result of past actions. And so again, to avoid actions that lead to more suffering, and to also experience more joy in positive actions. And then it goes on to say the fourfold practice. What is the fourfold practice? Different ways of explaining it, but one is to purify negativities. So when we find ourselves, and I know some of you have been doing this, when you find yourself in situations when the world and its inhabitants are filled with negativity, with horror, with unbelievable suffering, well, it's the time to definitely engage in the fourfold practice. One is purifying negativities as much as we can, to engage in this practice of applying the four powers of regret, remedy, resolve. What else? Regret, remedy, reliance. Oh, regret, reliance, remedy, and resolve. Right? Those four. So apply them, and to accumulate. That's the first of the four practices. The other one is to accumulate merit as much as we can. And there's so many opportunities. I mean, just doing tonglen when you're on the toilet, doing tonglen when you're in the traffic jam, doing tonglen when you're making your coffee. Any opportunity where you don't have to be fully focused on, I don't know, avoiding the other person as they swerve on your lane or whatever. No, I mean, most of the time we're on autopilot, and all those are opportunities to do tonglen. Tonglen for everyone, taking away their ignorance, their hatred, their attachment, and all this, and visualizing that, giving them all these beautiful qualities, right? So many opportunities, so many, and incredible opportunity to accumulate so much merit. So, number one, purifying negativities. And again, we can do this as well throughout our day, applying the four powers. If you're familiar with them, it doesn't take long. Any virtuous action can help you to, well, if you, for instance, you work in a hospital, for instance, or you do you engage in an action that in and of itself is benefiting others, and you can do other jobs that benefit others. If you in the morning apply the four antidotes, the four powers, or well, the power of the remedy, it's like your activity. So you then apply that, and your work becomes a way to purify. Right? A certain meeting with someone, a conversation with someone, helping them in a certain situation. Even you get paid for it, but honestly, it's like, yeah, that we find a way to pay someone for their kindness, but really, you can't really weigh the help you receive from others, like from a nurse, really. How do you weigh it in money? In actuality, it is virtuous. And if you don't just do it for the money, it's definitely very virtuous. And you don't have to be a nurse, of course. There's so many other occupations. Even if you clean the garbage, if you're a garbage man or garbage woman, I mean, I'm very grateful to a garbage man and woman, really. I know in India I have to find a garbage place where I can drop my garbage. It's challenging. Here in Germany, I'm very grateful to them. I mean, they don't have PhDs and so forth. I don't think our garbage man has a PhD, but so they don't have the same kind of status a doctor has. However, so kind and so important. So whichever job you're doing, you're definitely an important member of society. So with this motivation to benefit others, you apply the powers, you turn it into a purification practice, and you turn it into a meritorious action. I mean, it's all the mind, dependent on the mind. And then the third of the four practices is to well, sometimes they say make offerings to other beings, but also just generating compassion and love for other beings. So for other sentient beings, for harmful beings in particular, that is also for harmful being, love and compassion, however difficult it may be, but to generate to whichever degree you can. Again, very powerful. And the last is to, they say in the commentaries, they say, for instance, to make requests to the Dharma protectors. But I think even more so, make requests or kind of rely on the lamas, the great beings who serve as an inspiration to us, right? So in that way, I think you can expand it even. It doesn't have to just be certain protector beings that are considered to be Dharma protectors, but to mentally ask for assistance to continue our Dharma practice from the lamas, who are inseparable from the Dharma practitioners and so forth, inseparable from the Buddha. I think that covers it all. If you just apply it to the great spiritual masters and see them as inseparable from the Buddha, from the Dharma protectors and so forth. So with these four, you can take any adverse condition filled with negativity and so forth and turn it around. And of course, it gives us the opportunity to reflect on philosophy, impermanence, right? Of course, we can watch the situation. It's different every day. And yes, if things were really good yesterday, it doesn't mean they're really good today. But even if they're terrible today, it doesn't mean they're the same tomorrow. So in that way, they're a lesson in impermanence, that everything has an end, that yes, samsaric happiness, well, it comes and goes and comes and goes. And again, a lesson in impermanence and a lesson in love and compassion as well, to understand firsthand. I mean, who understands the suffering of others better than someone who suffered in the same way? That's why people oftentimes, when they were raped, they help other people who were raped themselves. Because if I got raped, I would trust a person who's had the same experience much more, because they can help me much more effectively. So again, if we find ourselves in a situation, certain sufferings, we're much more effective helping others who were in the same situation, right? Of course, we have had that experience. We know what it feels like from beginning to end. If we love the loved one, we're much better, someone really close to us, we're much better in helping others to overcome it, overcome that grief and so forth. So there's so much we can do. We just need to do it. And the beauty of it is that not only does it take us closer to enlightenment, but it helps us in that moment. It helps us. It's just how our mind works. It just helps us to deal with the situation more effectively. But again, number 3 is kind of like, again, number 2 is saying it's all about bodhicitta, and the point number 2 is about bodhicitta. And then everything that follows is explaining us how to do it. Number 3 is also basically saying the practices we're doing, they're going to explain now, they're all part of taking adverse conditions into the path of enlightenment. So whatever is to be followed, point 4, 5, and so forth, do not run away from problems, but face them. Face them. And like I said, some practitioners seek them out. But since we have a natural tendency to run away from problems, you may be lucky enough to have a master like Marpa who gives you a lot of trouble, right? Just read the life stories of the great masters, the biographies, Naropa, Tilopa, Marpa, Milarepa, and so forth. The most famous practitioners had to undergo so many hardships. And if these hardships didn't arise naturally for them, their masters made sure they experienced them, right? So why should it be different for us? We seek nirvana in samsara. We seek nirvana in samsara all the time. That's like seeking to find water in the driest desert. There must be water somewhere. Keep digging a little more, right? There's only sand. There's nothing there, and you keep digging and digging. It's like, looking for water in the driest desert ever. Impossible. So likewise, here, suffering has its advantages, as Shantideva tells us. So we're at a certain time now, and again, for those who feel like this text is too advanced, of course, there's a very advanced way to practice this, but there's also a beginner level. We can all do it. All right, so this is enough for today. How long have I talked? An hour and 20 minutes? Does that make sense? When did I start?
We started 6:22, something like that.
6:22, which is 5:22 in Germany. That's an hour and a half. Okay, sorry for that. Should we do, I don't know, what is the program? I mean, is there anything?
Is there a time for a question, or shall I leave it for next time?
Okay, let's do a question now. Let's do a question. I haven't really thought of the meditation yet. If it's all right with you, we don't do a meditation this time. We do it next time, and I'll hear Leora's question. Is that okay?
I heard
Mm-hmm.
this morning a teaching by Geshe Kelsang Wangmo,
Mm-hmm.
and she talked about adversing problems into the practice, and thanks God we have many of those these days. So I do it. But she said one sentence which I try to practice. Whatever happens, never rejoice when something negative, something bad happened to a difficult person, to enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to think, what do I want really before practicing? I do want my prime minister to disappear, my government to be found responsible for their actions. And I started to imagine it, if it happens, how do I react?
Mm.
What does it mean not to be happy? I want them to pay for it. Do I want to change that and just look at this as if it's my karma? What do I want from them? And don't even want them to pay for it? It's not your concern. How do I practice?
I would totally agree with Jetsuma, though I know it's really difficult. However, there's what I believe Jetsuma means is this. Let's take Bibi Netanyahu. Okay, so he gets ousted, let's say. All right. So there's two ways to rejoice. Two ways. One is the way to rejoice in the dharmic way, and one is the way to rejoice in the non-dharmic way. And she's referring to the rejoicing of the non-dharmic way. Okay. Okay, Bibi, I give you the example. So Bibi is on the news, he's out. And as an ordinary human being, I would go, yes, nice, got it, right? I'd be happy, honestly. I'd be happy, but to be happy in the sense that now he finally is upset, now he can feel what it's like. Now he can, right? My reaction is out of dislike for him. I'm happy that he's out because I don't like him, and I'm happy that he experiences the failure. On the other hand, going, I'm so happy it's over. For him, it's better. For Bibi, I don't know much about Bibi. Let's assume, well, okay. So what I assume he's doing is he's trying to destroy democracy in Israel. So he harms himself doing this. He harms himself destroying democracy. So for his own benefit, it is better because he can't do as much harm if he's not a prime minister. So for his own benefit, I'm happy that he no longer has the opportunity to harm him and others. You see, to give you an example, I remember years ago, I think it was Osama bin Laden. He was killed, right? You remember the time when Obama went to it was the Obama administration, and they went to Pakistan, and he was killed. I remember the first moment when I heard this, I went like, yes. And I thought, oh, wow, be careful. I just rejoiced in the death of I have to be careful. So I took a moment to think, well, it is good that he can no longer engage in terrorist actions. So I don't know. I mean, I assume, yes, he was a terrorist. He did what he is claiming. Some would say he didn't, but I believe, yes. So he was responsible for 9/11, etc. So the non-virtue he himself has accumulated, incredible, of killing so many people, and of course all the suffering that the victims experience, the families, etc. Terrible. So for his own sake, it's better his life is shortened. He can't accumulate that many non-virtues. So to think for his sake, it's better, for the sake of others, so I can be happy. And I tried to not make it, and I wasn't successful, of course, automatically it's like, oh yes, he's gone. And there's the sense, yes. So this happiness with his suffering. It was like being happy that he suffered, that he's now finally, and his supporters. And that was the wrong attitude. Instead, being happy or making an effort to be happy of the fact that he can no longer harm himself, that he does no longer accumulate non-virtue, right? To think, okay, he deserves happiness. He has a mind that is not different from the mind of a Buddha on the deepest level. So on the deeper level, his qualities are the same as everyone else's and as the Buddha's himself. So his faults are on a superficial level. To connect with him on a more deeper level, to be aware of these qualities, let's not forget that. Let's not forget that. And then when he's ousted, for instance, to feel like good for him, good for him. His negativities can't be as bad as they were so far. So he can no longer harm himself to the same degree. That is a kind of rejoicing. I don't think it harms you. You see what I'm saying? So I think what Jetsima was saying, to rejoice, for instance, my thought would be the person turns out to be the most cruel Hamas terrorist, the one who of the whole group has proved to be the most cruel. So when we hear this person is killed, okay, to watch out. Of course, there'd be a reaction, and it's an automatic, possibly going like, oh, crap. No, just take a moment. There's a human being underneath. There's a being who on a deeper level, is not different from a Buddha, who's driven by hatred, by ignorance, by a